Hello, everybody. As everybody's hopping on, I'll give us a little bit of time to make sure everybody that's on is on. Welcome to the first night of the Fall Master Beef webinar series. We're really happy that you're joining us from your home counties tonight. My name is Mallory. I'm a graduate student under Dr. Katie Mason, our beef cattle nutrition specialist, and she's also the coordinator for our webinars in the coming weeks. So over the next 10 webinars, you'll likely either see me, Dr. Mason, or our extension assistant, Sawyer Main, to host each of our webinars. So from each of us, we're really glad that you've joined us. Before we get started, I also wanted just to give a couple reminders about our webinars. Please remember that you must register for each of the webinars that you wish to attend. So there's a different link for each webinar. So make sure you go to our website and fill out the registration forms for each of those meetings. This just ensures that we get the right information for your certification at the end of the series. And at the end of tonight's webinar, there'll be a small survey to fill out. It shouldn't take too much time, but make sure you fill out those to better help us with any questions or comments you have about each of our webinars and our speakers, and that'll better help us prepare for next year as well. At the end of the webinar, we'll have a little small question and answer session with Dr. Bates. So you'll see within your panel, there's a Q&A box. So either use the Q&A box or your chat. We'll be sure to get all those questions answered for you. But without further ado, you've heard me talk enough. We have Dr. Gary Bates, our plant science department head, with us tonight to speak. So take it away, Dr. Bates.
Okay, Mallory, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And look, everybody, I do appreciate y'all taking time out on a beautiful day like we've got to be able to listen to us. Okay, so Mallory, can you see the slide there?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, fantastic. So what I thought we would do, okay, is just take the next few minutes and let's talk about kind of some specific practices that you need to be thinking about trying to do this fall. And, we'll kind of go through those. And then at the end, we'll have just an open question and answer session. And Mallory, I'm assuming that you're going to be kind of monitoring the question and answer. So if there are any questions as we're going through this, don't hesitate to type them in. And Mallory will interrupt, ask the question, because I'm sure if you have the question, there's probably several other people on the webinar that has the same question. So let's kind of jump into this. So when we start talking about fall practices, the one that I'm getting a lot of questions about right now, okay, has to do with pasture reseeding and how to either plant new pastures, how to, thicken stands up, some things kind of along those lines. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about that and just kind of go through some of the steps to make sure that you're as successful as possible. And so here's the first one right here that we're going to say, okay, is plant into a good seed bed. And, I can remember if you go through any, book that I had, in my agronomy classes during college, one of the first things they tell you is plant into a fern, fine, seed bed. And when we start talking about planting into a good seed bed now with no-till, we're talking about something like this, okay, where you've removed all the competition. So when you drill your seed in there isn't anything that is going to be overly competitive with your new grass seedlings. And so this is, one of the best situations to be able to plant into. Now, one of the situations that we get into and the question that I get a lot is that, okay, people say, well, Bates, okay, so maybe my stand of grass is not quite thick enough. Okay, so I need to thicken it up some, but it's not so bad that I want to kill the whole thing. And so how do we go about trying to do that? And so I'll tell you, okay, so that is possible to be done, but I would also say, make sure you understand that anything that you do apart from this right here that we're showing is you're increasing the chances of having some sort of a problem, okay, and primarily because of competition. And so if you don't want to kill everything, you just want to drill right into it, the first thing that you need to do is to mow it absolutely as low as you possibly can. So instead of using a herbicide like in this picture right here to remove the competition, what we're hoping to be able to do is to be able to use that mowing to get all the stubble removed, maybe set the plants back a little bit. And what I would do is I would mow, and then I would pretty much immediately come in and drill, because what's end up happening is the plants that you're mowing, they're established, they have a good root system, so they're going to come back quicker. And so what your plan is that you can mow them, get it drilled in, and hopefully get germination quick enough so that, your seedlings can come on up and can, begin to be able to compete. Now, I'm not sure where everybody on this webinar is from, but there's some, areas where, we haven't really gotten enough rain over the last, 3 or 4 weeks, something like that. Some places are starting to get, pretty dry again. What you would want to do is hopefully have some moisture in your soil so that when you plant, those seeds can immediately begin to imbibe or take in that water and begin the germination process. So, hopefully you've got a little bit of soil moisture so that, you can be able to get that done. So that's the first thing is, plant to a good seed bed so that hopefully you have as little competition as you can have to let those seedlings be able to get established. Here's the second thing that we're going to say is plant the proper amount of seed. So if we're talking about planting tall fescue, what we recommend is 15 to 20 pounds to the acre. Okay, so that's our recommended, and most people, usually tend to go slightly above our seeding recommendations. But if anybody has checked the price of seed recently, y'all might want to stay closer to that 15 to 20 pounds and not go above that, because seed is pretty expensive. So once you got to put 15 to 20 pounds out, okay, the thing is actually making sure you're putting out that amount of seed. So if you get ready to drill, you've got to make sure that you're checking your drill out and you're kind of calibrating your drill so that you make sure that you're actually getting that amount of seed out. One of the things that goes with these no-till drills is a lot of times when we set those things, what'll happen is on either the inside of the, one of the lid of the boxes, or maybe there's a manual that comes with the drill. It'll give you a chart that'll say, okay, if you want to plant fescue, and you want to plant, 20 pounds to the acre, it'll tell you the setting that you want to put this drill on. Now that is a good place to start, but that is not always correct. Okay, a lot of times, in fact, the majority of the times that I've ever used any no-till drill, whether it's, one of these, a Pasture Durtech or a Great Plains or a John Deere, whatever it is, usually those charts are not exactly correct. And the reason is because a couple of things. I mean, one of them is drills get older and get used more. Some of the parts get worn, and so the seed doesn't always flow at the same rate as maybe it did, when it was brand new or just coming out of the factory. But there's another thing that influences the seed flow through a drill, and it can be kind of seed size related. Because one of the things that's interesting is that, the same species of any forage can have slightly different size seed year to year, or even two different varieties of the same species can have slightly different seed sizes, and that affects the seeding the seeding rate of what flows through that drill. This is just a little data from a friend of mine in Kentucky that did a quick study. Now in this case, he did it with excuse me, with alfalfa. And so what he did here was he took a drill, and he took, variety one, the first variety that he had of the alfalfa. It was pure uncoated seed. Okay. And he put the seed out in all the different openings. And this is what he saw kind of as the flow path. So if he wanted to put 20 pounds out, he had to open it to that 7/8 mark. So then he came back and he used a second variety, still uncoated seed, but just a second variety of alfalfa. And he did the same thing. And that's the red line right here. And so what he saw was variety 2 flowed through that drill a little bit faster, so that instead of putting out, 20 pounds to the acre at the 7/8, he was putting out about, 24 pounds to the acre. Okay. Then he came back, and what he did was he did another seeding where he seeded the same variety of variety 1, the very same variety what he used before, but this time the seed was coated. It had the rhizobium coating and some of that kind of lime coating on it. He did it again, and what he saw was, in this case, it flowed out much faster, flowed out about 30% faster. And so if he would have stayed with that 7/8, he was putting out like 28, 29 pounds of seed. The reason the coated seed flowed out faster was because that coating, it made the seed a little bigger, obviously, because of the coating, but it made it slicker. So it flowed through the drill faster. And that's why you get that difference in the seeding rate on those. And so the situation you find yourself in, is that let's just say that, the drill was calibrated at the factory, using variety 1, and, that's what they had. But when you used it, you're planting a different variety that's going to flow at this rate, or maybe you're even using coated seed, was going to flow out much faster. And if you depend on that chart, you could end up putting out a whole lot more seed, so that you end up putting all your seed maybe on half the field. Or on the other side of it, you may not be putting out enough seed. And so you get through and you find out that you've got to go over the field twice to get enough seed out. So it's going to be very important to calibrate the drill. If you go to utbeef.com, under the forage section, under the seeding or the planting section, we have something on there that's a guide to how to calibrate a drill. But if nothing else, just weigh out about 25 pounds of seed. Put about 25 pounds and drive over an acre or so and just see how close you are in terms of your seeding rate. Then you can kind of adjust it from there. So I guess the thing is don't trust that that chart, because 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be exact. It's going to require a little bit of adjustment from there. Okay. Third thing you got to pay attention to is making sure you're.
Sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Bates.
Yeah, go ahead.
Question. If you haven't discussed it already, we had a question about if you have a no-till drill, and if you could discuss any thoughts on broadcast spreading.
Okay, if you don't have, make sure I get this right. If you don't have a no-till drill, what about broadcast seeding?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, so if we're talking about fescue, okay, the fescue is going to be much more successful if you can make sure you get good soil to seed contact. Okay, and so it's better to drill it. If you don't have a drill and you're going to broadcast it, probably what you need to do is do some type of soil disturbance. Okay, again, make sure that you mow it and get that stubble down as low as you can, and then do something like maybe pulling a disc, but setting the disc straight so it's not real aggressive, it's just kind of cutting, or maybe pulling a harrow, something like that, so that you can disturb the ground, and then you can try to improve your soil to seed contact. Now, here's what I will also say to that is if you're not able to use a drill and you're just going to broadcast it, what that is doing is adding another kind of potential issue that is decreasing, or let's say it's going to increase your chances of having problems. So if you're trying to, you're not spraying and killing, you're just mowing, you got a little bit of a, higher risk of having, a problem because you haven't removed the competition. Then if you broadcast and all you do is kind of pull a harrow to kind of loosen the ground a little bit, then you've got another kind of chance of having a little bit of an issue because you're not ensuring good soil to seed contact. So if everything, if it rains, you get good moisture and you get that good soil to seed contact, that can work fine. But usually what we recommend is if you're going to broadcast, you probably need to bump your rate up a little bit because you're not going to get quite as good a soil to seed contact, and you're not going to get quite as as good seed germination in that case. But that's a really good question. Okay, the third thing that we have here is planting at the proper depth. What we what we normally recommend for most of our forage crops is we want to be at somewhere between an 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch deep. I mean, because so that's relatively shallow. Now, if you're broadcasting, obviously that's not an issue. You're not going to put it too deep. If you are no-tilling, you do have to be careful with your drill that you're not sinking it too deep. And so just again, let me show you some data, okay, that illustrates the importance or the impact that seeding depth can have on your plant emergence. So in this study, they planted 5 different species. So, white clover, alfalfa, timothy, red clover, those are 3 of them are legumes, timothy is a grass. And then they had brome grass in here, which is another cool season perennial grass. And from a seed size standpoint, it's going to be very similar to tall fescue. So we could just as easily, have listed tall fescue there. And then what they did was they planted it at these different depths. So they just barely covered it under the soil, or they went 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 2 inch, or 3 inch. And what these lines show you are the different percentages of the different grasses, or the forages, how they emerged. And what I want you to notice is really, first of all, how these are listed is basically according to seed size. So this is smallest to largest in terms of seed size. And what you'll notice is that the deeper that you plant, the less emergence you have of the grass, and it has of this forages, and the bigger the smaller the seed is, the bigger the impact is. So to the point when it got planted 2 inches, basically nothing came up, and only about half of the smooth brome grass came up. Now, the reason that I want to make a point on this, okay, is that if you, excuse me, man, I'm getting all choked up. I'm so excited about this. Okay, so if you get ready to drill something, okay, you go and you rent a drill. And what they may tell you is that, the person before you planted fescue, so the drill is set up, for fescue. Well, first of all, you don't know if the guy, the person that had it before you, if they knew what they were doing or not, okay? So don't assume that the seeding rate is set right. But also you can't assume that the drill is set for the right depth, because what if the person that had it before you, let's say he knew what he was doing, and he got it set so that he was planting it at about 1/4 of an inch deep, but his soil was a little bit dry, okay? So he had to put some extra pressure on those, those cutting cultures to get it to cut that deep. You get the drill, and in the meantime, it's rained, so you've got good soil moisture. The ground is softer. So you leave that same setup, then what ends up happening is instead of you planting it at 1/4 of an inch, you could sink that thing 2 inches down. All of a sudden, well, if you look at this data, then what ends up happening is you're going to get about 50% of your plants up, okay? And so the thing that's interesting about that, okay, is that let's say that you've done everything right, okay? You've planted into a good seed bed. You've gotten good seed. You planted it at the right time. You had good soil moisture. You put the right amount of seed out, and only half the seed comes up, okay? Usually the thing that everybody thinks is, well, I did everything right. The seed must have been bad, because that's why only half of it come up. And then in reality, what it was that you set it too deep. So what we would always recommend is anytime you get ready to use a no-till drill, okay, and you go through and you're trying to, clean everything up, make sure everything, your seed path is clean, everything is flowing, you're calibrated, whatever. Also walk behind that drill and take your pocket knife or whatever and start digging to see how deep is that furrow and where is that seed getting placed. And so you want most of the seed to be right there at about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. In fact, you probably want a little bit of your seed still kind of on the top of the ground. But if you start digging in there and you see it's putting it too deep, then what you need to do is adjust that drill so that that drill can't go quite as deep. You can't cut it quite as deep. And that's going to be very important. Now, Mallory, are you still there, or did you go off to eat tacos? I want y'all to notice this right here. This work was published in 1939. Okay, so we're coming up on 100 years ago was when this work first got published. But I guarantee you that there are people this fall that are going to make this mistake right here. So I can't urge you enough. Check that seeding depth to make sure you don't put it too deep, so you can make sure that you know that you get as much of that seed emerged as you possibly can. Okay. The next,
Dr. Bates, sorry.
go ahead.
Are the 3-point hitch mounted overseeders a good option?
Okay, so when we talk about an overseeder, I'm assuming that we're talking about a broadcast seeder.
Okay.
I'm assuming because most of the no-till drills that I work with are, you know, hitch pulled and all. But so yes, the 3-point broadcast seeder, and whoever asked that question, if you can if I'm not answering the question you're asking, straighten me out here. But yeah, you know, the 3-point hitch ones can work fine. The problem with those is that, you know, the ability to adjust the flow rate, you know, through using that gate is not maybe as fine as it's a little harder to get it adjusted just right. So you might need to do a little bit of just kind of practice. Put about, you know, 20, 25 pounds out there and kind of drive over an acre and see how close you are. The type that of broadcast seeder that I've used the most recently are kind of the little ones that can hook on to ATVs or tailgates of trucks. They're those they run off of the little batteries. One brand that I know of is called the herd seeder, but there's several more of those types, and those are much easier to adjust in terms of trying to get them set the right way. So do you know, did that answer his question, the question that was asked? Hopefully it did.
Mr. Hampton, if you'll type in the Q&A box, if that does it, I'll make sure that gets to him.
Okay.
Oh, hold on 1 second. Sorry.
Okay.
Not a broadcast seeder, similar to no-till, but smaller.
Not a broadcast seeder, but similar to a no-till or smaller. Okay, so I'm not 100% sure what that is. I mean, I've seen several different types. In fact, yeah, I think there's a friend of mine that has one that, now that you think about it, yeah, he's got one that has that hooks up to a 3-point hitch. So yes, they can work. It still comes down to adjusting those things so they're putting them at the right depth. There's really nothing magic about you know, any of the no-till drills. They all work fine. It's just you got to make sure that you're cutting a good furrow, that it's putting it at the right depth, and that whatever mechanism it has behind, whether it be a press wheel or some sort of a drag, that it's trying to cover that seed up. So that's the big thing to pay attention to, is making sure that you're cutting the right depth of a furrow, and that once you place that seed, then that furrow is getting covered back up. Those are really the big things. So there's a lot of different type of drills, you know, that can work. I can't say I have personally used one of those 3-point hitch types, but I do know there's a guy that I know that has one, and he's had, you know, pretty good success with it.
And then sorry.
No, don't go ahead.
Questions we're having tonight. I'm really excited about that. Kind of going off the depth with the dry weather that we're having, is it currently better to plant deeper to find moisture in the ground, or what's your opinion on that?
Okay, yeah, that's a legitimate question. I would say no, it is not better to plant deeper just to find that moisture, and the reason is because even if you do find that moisture, you know, from the moment that seed germinates to when it breaks through the soil surface, it is depending on stored energy to be able to grow. And it's got to then be able to break through that soil surface so it can get some leaves into the sunlight, so it can photosynthesize to make energy. And the deeper you plant it, the more energy that it takes to be able to get up through that soil surface. So if you plant it too deep, it can begin to germinate, and it'll have that, that little stem kind of coming up through there, but it might run out of energy before it breaks through the soil surface. And so we'll go back to that data right there. Okay. If you plant it too deep, you are going to decrease the amount of those seed that are going to be able to emerge. So if you find yourself in a situation where it's too dry to plant, don't plant deeper, wait for rain, because you've got to put this stuff at the right depth. Okay, and then here's the third thing to pay attention to, and this is particularly important. Okay, if you have not burnt everything down and you just mowed everything down, you've got to really pay attention to your weeds during this first fall, because you can find yourself in a situation where you might have various weeds, chickweed or plantains or whatever it may end up being, that are just terribly competitive problems. And so you might need to watch this stand and don't just drive by and look at it and say, hey, look, it's green, it must be coming up and everything, because that green that you're seeing might be weeds instead of your grass. And if you start seeing your weeds being terribly competitive, the thing you might need to do is, let's try to work through what a herbicide program would be. We're pretty limited on what we can do with new seedlings of grass. I got a call actually just today from somebody that had planted some tall fescue a couple of weeks ago, and it was turning green, looking really good, but they went out there and they walked the field, and come to find out, they did have fescue that was 2 or 3 inches tall, but they also had a lot of buckhorn planting out there, and they were worried about losing the stand to buckhorn planting. And what we recommended to them, since we knew that the planting was seedling because they had sprayed and killed everything, they could put about a pint to maybe a pint and a half of 2,4-D on it, and that the fescue was big enough to handle that rate, and then they could kill probably most of that planting since it was seedling, and they would be able to rescue that stand like that. So we can go with a low rate of 2,4-D, and if it's established plant, it's got an established root system, we may not be able to kill it, okay, but hopefully what we can do is we can stun it enough so that those the grass seedlings can come on, and then we can get them established, and then maybe do some more herbicide applications in that in that following springtime, when the grass is a little bit more established, and we'll be able to put a little bit more herbicide on there. Okay. So that's kind of some steps on seedling. So here's the thing that I want you to kind of make sure that you get from this section of it, okay? Is that anytime that, we do any sort of seeding, it's a precarious thing. We're taking a seed and putting it into a relatively harsh condition. We're wanting that seed to germinate and get established. So we want to do everything we can to ensure success. That's the reason, we'd like to plant into a good seed bed. And kill everything. That's the other reason we want to make sure that we put out, the right amount of seed. Don't try to cut your seeding rate to save a little bit of money, because we've got to get, good establishment. And then, make sure that we watch weed competition as we move through this to see, is there anything that we need to do from that standpoint? Okay, the next thing that we want to talk about is a little bit about just general fall weed control. And in this case, I'm talking about just your general pastures, not ones that you're establishing, but ones that you already have out there. Because, what's going to happen is we are beginning to see cool season weeds germinating right now. You may not have noticed it, but if you walk through some of your pastures and start looking down, you will see a lot of little broadleaf plants kind of germinating out through there. And so when we start talking about a lot of these cool season weeds, we're talking about buttercup, chickweed, plantains, thistles, various things like that. And so what happens with these weeds, okay, is that, they begin to germinate and grow this time of the year right now. So, we get a little moisture, our temperatures, particularly our nighttime temperatures, begin to cool down, those plants begin to germinate, and they're going to continue to germinate this, this fall on into, sometime in November, something along those lines. And then what's going to end up happening, okay, is that those plants from that point on all the way until about kind of that first little bit of April, they're just going to be out there on the ground growing. Okay, they're going to be flat, the buttercup, thistles, whatever it is. They're just out there growing. And then when we get into sometime in April, what's going to happen, okay, is that they are going to, there's going to be a certain ratio of daylight to dark that's going to stimulate those weeds to begin to bloom. So thistles begin to bolt up, buttercups begin to, bloom and turn yellow. And then what's going to happen is they're going to do that until maybe the first week or so of June. Then they're going to die. Okay. Or if they're an annual, if they're perennial, they're going to kind of go dormant and, start the process over again the following kind of September. So when we get ready to try to control these weeds, what we're looking for is this window in December through kind of late March, early April. That's our window control these cool season weeds. And a lot of times people really don't think about weed control until we get into February or March. But quite honestly, that's sometimes a very difficult time to control weeds because it's raining a lot. It can potentially be really cold, and generally the ground tends to be really muddy. So it's just a pain to spray during that period. Whereas a lot of times this kind of late November, December period is a much easier time of the year to be able to spray. Maybe there's not quite as much stuff going on. The ground's going to be firmer and it's going to be easier to spray. And so this is a window that we really like to see people try to take advantage of to control these cool season weeds. All you need to be effective is just a little bit of warm weather. All you need is 3 days where your high temperature is going to get to about 60 degrees. And if you get that, it's going to stimulate that weed to grow enough so that you put the herbicide on there, it'll take it in and it will kill it. So it's a lot easier to spray then. And one of the other reasons we like this December spray, particularly if you're using 2,4-D, okay, if you have to use a high enough rate of 2,4-D that it kills, all your weeds, all your weeds, plus it kills all your clover, the 2,4-D is going to be gone in about 30 days from the soil. It breaks down and is gone in 30 days. So it still lets you be able to come in February and replant your clovers. And so this is another reason why that December spray works really, really well. That if you have to some harder to control weeds, something like a lot of buckhorn planting, you can kill that and then still be able to come in and plant clovers. Now that's if you spray 2,4-D. Now, if you're going on with something like Grazing Next or the Duracore, then you're basically out of clovers, for the following next year. But if you're using 2,4-D, we can apply it here and still be able to come back in and plant those clovers. And so as far as which herbicides are the ones that you want to use, we would like to be able to stay with 2,4-D as much as we can. And the reason is because the carryover with 2,4-D is really very short. It's only about, maybe 28, 30 days, something like that. So if what we're trying to kill are things like buttercups and thistles, really it only takes 2 pints per acre. 1 quart per acre is all you need to be able to control those. If you have those, plus you have, some buckhorn planting in there, you probably need to double that rate and go from 2 pints per acre to 4 pints per acre to be able to really be able to control those. And as a matter of fact, if you did have the plantings, if you wanted to apply that 4 pints per acre and then spike it with about 1 quart of dicamba, that would help you out even a little bit more. And that would be kind of the recommendation we'd have for the herbicides. Make sure that when you're doing this, you add non-ionic surfactant with this. And so you just want to apply, 2 pints or 1 quart per 100 gallons of spray mix is the rate of that surfactant. And that just improves the ability of that herbicide to be able to stick to that plant and get inside of it. And then when you're applying, you know, the herbicide, you want to use about 20 gallons per acre. So that, you know, when we put that fluid out there, we're putting out plenty of water so we get really good coverage on our weeds. Okay. And so those would be the recommendations that we have, you know, for that. Okay. So I'm seeing a question here. What is the timeline for seeding winter perennial? Okay. Normally, if you look on our seeding guides, I think most of the time we say the cutoff date is October the 1st. But with over the last decade or so, you know, as we have had kind of warmer falls, I still think we have probably at least 2 weeks left in our seeding window. So it does not make me nervous if we went to the middle of October, maybe even the 3rd week. Now, the later that we get, okay, the more chance we have of it getting cold early on those little seedlings and then have some issues. But I still think we have a couple of weeks, you know, left on our seeding window. I see there's another question that says, are there any natural ways to go to control weeds without using herbicides? Okay, and you know, really the best method to control weeds is going to be having a really competitive stand of grass. Okay, so having a thick stand of grass with good soil fertility so that there's really not any spots for weeds to be able to come up with. Once you get weeds in there, there's about the only natural way that you have to be able to control weeds in a grass is using goats. I mean, because a lot of times they select those weeds out, but there's not really specifically any natural way to control weeds once we end up, you know, with the weeds out there. I mean, there's not really any natural herbicides or anything like that that we have the ability to be able to use. Okay, so I think that might be all of the questions on that section. Okay, so let me kind of go on here. If I can make this work. Okay, the third thing that I wanted to try to mention, and we are right now at the time where we need to be thinking about stockpiling tall fescue. You know, one of the biggest issues that a cattle producer has is we have got to find ways to cut expenses. Okay, because we're not particularly in control, you know, the price that we're getting for animals. I mean, we can maybe do some marketing things to try to get slightly higher prices, but we really can't control the price. So we can't maybe really control our income, but what we can do is try to control our expenses. And one of the biggest expenses that we have in a cow-calf operation is feeding those cows during the wintertime. And it's the cost of hay, because hay is just absolutely outrageously expensive. By the time you count, you know, what it takes in terms of the fertilizer that you apply and all the machinery that is involved with it, all of the time that it takes and all, it's really incredibly expensive. It's not unusual for somebody, you know, it costs, you know, somewhere between $100 to $120 a ton to actually produce hay if you are a relatively small producer. So anything that we can do to cut down the amount of hay we have to feed is going to be able to save us money. So one of the best tools that we have is to stockpile tall fescue. And what I've got right here showing you is just the growth season of tall fescue. And, you know, everybody has lived this year after year. So we know what happens is we get good growth in the spring, it slumps during the summertime, and then it begins to pick up in the fall. And so if you go look at tall fescues right now, pastures, you know, they've begun to green up. They're starting to grow because our temperatures have cooled down. We did get some rainfall, you know, kind of in September. And so what we want to do when we get ready to start stockpiling fescue is to just accumulate as much of this growth as we can and accumulate some of it and save it so that you grow it here, but some of it you can save to graze later into that December and January period when the fescue is not growing anymore. And the reason that we can do that, okay, is because number one, the quality of the fescue grown in the fall is incredibly high. You know, it's going to be 20% protein it's going to be, maybe almost 80% digestible. It's just one of the best forages that we can grow all year. But the other reason that this works is because the quality of the fescue in the fall does not degrade very fast. Okay, if you go out there and look, it doesn't have a whole lot of stem to it. It's mostly leaves, which is where the high quality portion of the forage is. But the other thing that makes this work is that the way that tall fescue grows, it tends to kind of stand upright. And so even if it rains on it or snows on it, those leaves don't kind of tend to fall over and hit the ground and degrade. They stay upright, and so they maintain their quality. And you look at this work, and even fescue that they had accumulated from the September and October period, even when they got into February, it was still 10% protein, which is good enough to meet the needs of most of our cows on the farm at that point. So we can take advantage of this from tall fescue and to try to accumulate as much growth as we can in the fall to graze later during that wintertime. I can't do this same thing with, say, orchard grass. And the reason is because of the orchard grass. Number one, it doesn't grow as much in the fall as fescue does. But the other reason is because the leaves are a lot more kind of pliable. And so they tend to kind of fall over more. And if it rains or snows on them, they kind of fall over onto the ground. And once they touch the ground, they just begin to degrade. Whereas fescue kind of is still staying upright. So we would recommend for you to be trying to set aside some of the fescue to be able to stockpile. The recommendations for this are pretty straightforward. We want to come in the fall, clip those pastures so that we take off all the old, Johnson grass, crabgrass, all the junk that accumulates during the summertime, and then fertilize it with up to about 120 pounds of urea, okay, which is going to give you up to about 60 pounds of nitrogen. And then you don't want to fertilize until you've had a good rain, because you want the plant, that fescue plant, to have moisture so it can grow, so it can utilize that nitrogen. Okay, now where we're at right now, we're at, what is today, the 4th of October. I'm not sure that I would put nitrogen on at this point. I think it might be a little bit late. If I were going to put nitrogen on, I probably wouldn't put on any more than about 30 pounds of nitrogen per acre, because we need to have about 30 days of pretty good growing conditions for the plants to be able to use the nitrogen. And whether we've got 30 days or not is it's a little bit of a gamble. We don't know what's going to happen, but it's a little bit of a risk. So I wouldn't go real heavy with the nitrogen. I'd stay pretty light. And then, what you want to do is just save some of the forage, some of the pastures, keep the animals off, select one of your fescue pastures that have the best stand, keep the animals off of it, just let it grow and accumulate. And then at some point in the fall, you can then put the animals out there, let them start grazing it, and it'll save on your hay feeding. There's nothing magic about the nitrogen to making the stockpiling work. So you don't have to apply the nitrogen. The only thing the nitrogen does is just give you more forage growth. But my experience has been that, when somebody starts trying to do some stockpiling, and they have to be very intentional about it, with selecting some pastures that they're not going to put animals on. They're going to keep the animals off, set it aside. It's probably one of the most economical recommendations that we have, because if I can get an extra, ton of forage out there by letting that forage just accumulate and not getting grazed, that can give me an extra probably 30 to 45 days of grazing on into that December period, and it can cut down my hay feeding needs. Okay. Let's see. Is there a recommended height for the fescue saved for forage? And so I'm going to assume what that means is there a recommended height to graze the fescue down? Do you not want to graze it down kind of below 3 inches when you're grazing it in the fall? If that's not the question you're asking, again, type it in there and straighten me out. But in the fall, what we can do is we can graze the fescue actually down to just 1 or 2 inches. During the springtime, we don't want to do that. We want to maintain a 3 to 4 inch stubble height. And the reason we want to do that is because the fescue during that spring and summer is always trying to regrow. But if I'm grazing during this kind of December period, the fescue has been, there's been enough cold weather on it that it's kind of gone dormant for the wintertime. And so it's not trying to regrow. So I can graze it down, and the grazing it low during that wintertime is not going to hurt me like it is, during the springtime. So you can go ahead and graze it all the way down. Question is there a height that's too tall? Okay. Could we turn the cows out in the field with 3 foot tall grass in it? Okay. Well, depends on what the grass is. Okay. So if we're talking about fescue that has grown that much, there's no problem with that whatsoever. But the thing that I would be wondering about is if I've got grass that's 3 foot tall right now, it may not be fescue. It may be some sort of summer grass that has grown during the summertime, and it's just kind of hanging on right here at the end. And so you can graze those depending on the species. I've got a slide where we're going to talk about this later, but we'll go ahead and cover it now. The one grass that I'd be worried about grazing right now that would be kind of coming up wild in pastures would be Johnson grass. Because one of the things that happens with Johnson grass, and it also happens with sorghum Sudan grass, any grass that is in the sorghum genus, what happens is when we get these cooler nights and we start getting close to light frost, what can end up happening is that frost stresses that plant, and it causes that plant to release cyanide, which in the plant standpoint, we call it prussic acid. And that's dangerous to cattle. So it can kill cattle pretty quickly. And so if you have any Johnson grass that's out there this time of the year, if there's a lot of it out there, don't graze that. Okay. You would want to mow it down, or if there's a bunch of it out there, you could mow it for hay, but don't graze it. Prussic acid is not a problem in hay because the prussic acid breaks down over the course of about a 10-day to 2-week period, but it is a grazing problem. Okay. And so a lot of it would depend on what the grass is. Now, if it's a field that's got a lot of Dallas grass and crabgrass and other kind of things, and they're kind of starting to turn a little bit brown right now, or starting to kind of yellow, look, go ahead and graze those things off, because their quality is going to be dropping really quick. So go ahead and use those now. But be careful if it's Johnson grass. If it's fescue during the fall, fescue is not going to get too tall so that the quality is going to just drop and become nothing. Not in the fall. The quality is going to be incredibly high. There's another question here that says, would applying lime in the fall be beneficial? There's not really any specific benefit to spring versus fall. There's a benefit to lime because it gets into the soil and causes the pH to go up, which, we want our pH to be between 6 and 6.5. But I can't say there's any specific plant benefit to it being done in the fall versus the spring. A lot of times it's easier to get lime applied in the fall because it's more available to have people to be able to spread it, but there's not any specific benefit to doing it in the fall compared to in the spring. Okay, now let's go on to kind of a related topic to the stockpiling of tall fescue. One of the questions that I get a lot is I see people that want to drill small grains into a fescue pasture. Maybe they want to, drill some wheat in to be able to, the point is to try to get more kind of fall, winter grazing to cut their hay needs down. And so sometimes, people might try, whether it be wheat or rye, maybe annual ryegrass. And so we did, a study a few years ago to answer a very specific question. Is if you take a stand of tall fescue and you drill a winter annual in it, will it increase that winter yield so that you would have more grazing over fescue by itself? Okay, so what we did was we tried 2 winter annuals. We tried wheat and annual ryegrass. We tried 2 different seeding dates. Okay, one that we'll call kind of an early seeding date, which is kind of mid-September. and another one we called the late seeding date, which is mid-October. And then for fertilization, we tried some different fertility treatments on it. In the fall, okay, we tried either 0, 60, or 90 pounds of nitrogen. Now, in the spring, everything got 80 pounds of nitrogen, but in the fall, we had these different treatments on. Okay, and so let me show you the data that we got. Okay, now, first of all, I'm only going to show you the early seeding data. Okay, and the reason was because when we looked at early versus late, it doesn't, take a PhD from Knoxville to come in here and tell you if you plant something early, you get more yield than if you plant something late. That's what we saw. So I'm only going to show you the early seeding data. So this was the fall yield data. So we harvested this stuff on December the 15th. And so what we were doing at that point is we figured, okay, by that point, we've had all the fall growth we're going to get, and it would give us an estimate of how much fall grazing we got on that. Okay, so what I want you to notice was, as we go down, this was the fescue by itself. This was fescue with ryegrass seeded into it. This was fescue with wheat seeded into it. And here are the different nitrogen treatments. So what I want you to notice is that within any nitrogen treatment, there was not an advantage to adding either ryegrass or wheat into the tall fescue. Okay, it didn't improve yield. The thing that improved yield was adding the nitrogen. Okay, and so I guess the thing that I saw when I looked at this data was, okay, if I want to get as much fall grazing as I possibly can, okay, I'm better off spending money on nitrogen, not on seed, because it's really the nitrogen that's giving me the improvement in yield. Okay, it's not adding more seed to it. Now, we also came in the spring, okay, or late winter, whatever you want to call this, and we harvested, and we harvested it March the 15th. And the reason, now this is a really, really early harvest, okay, but what we were trying to do was to see, okay, would one of these treatments green up earlier than the other ones? If you drilled a winter annual, would it begin to grow earlier in the spring? So maybe you could stop feeding hay a little bit earlier. Now, every one of these plots got 80 pounds of nitrogen about the 3rd week of February. So about 3 weeks or so before we harvested. These, again, these are the nitrogen applications that occurred in the fall. And so what I want you to notice is within each of these fall nitrogen treatments, there was no improvement in yield by adding the seed. But the thing that was interesting to me is that even though every one of these plots, okay, got 80 pounds of nitrogen, the fall application of nitrogen actually increased my spring yield, because you can notice that as we go across, yield increases. And once I started kind of backing up and thinking about it, it really kind of made sense. The more nitrogen I apply in the fall, the faster the plants are going to be growing in that fall period. So the faster they grow, they're going to have enough energy to be able to produce all that top growth, but they're also going to put some of that energy into the roots. So the higher the nitrogen rate, the more energy that those plants go into the wintertime with in their roots. The ones that have the highest energy in the roots during the springtime, those are the ones that green up and grow the fastest. So the thing that I recognized by doing this study was not only does fall nitrogen help you on your fall growth, it actually helps your fescue come out earlier in the spring. And so kind of the point that we got from this study was that, look, if you have a good stand of fescue, there's no reason to do any sort of overseeding with this. Okay, don't spend your money on the drilling wheat or something in there. Spend your money on nitrogen, not on seed, because that's what's impacting your yield. Now, the only thing that would kind of change that would be if you just kind of have a medium to poor stand of fescue. So if you find yourself in a situation where your fescue stand is not as good as what you need it to be, there's a lot of open spots in there, so that you physically don't have enough grass plants to give you all the yield that you need, then you need to add more grass to it. Okay, and so you could drill something like some wheat into that, which will give you more grass plants, which will then eventually give you more yield. The problem with that is that when you get into May, that wheat is going to die, and then you're going to be left still with the thin stand of fescue. So at some point, you're going to have to thicken that stand of fescue up. It may not be, this fall, or you may not be able to do every field, so the fields you can't thicken up with fescue, maybe that's going to where you're going to want to drill some wheat into that. But that is not something that should be a routine practice that you go into every year, because the data kind of shows that it's really not helping you in terms of increasing your winter grazing. Okay, and then just another couple of just kind of general items that I thought we would talk about. We just mentioned about prussic acid. So if you have a field of Sudex right now, do not graze it. Okay, only cut it for hay, because prussic acid is going to break down in the hay, but it's toxic as a grazing field. If you have a field that's got a bunch of Johnson grass in it, you want to pay attention, do the same thing. Now, if it's a field of fescue that just has a little patch of Johnson grass, here and there, kind of spread around, so there's not much of it, I'm not going to be too concerned about that, because the animals are going to much more prefer the fescue. They're not going to eat that Johnson grass. But if it's got if it's 30-40% Johnson grass, you might need to be careful of it. And if you're not going to cut it for hay, don't go in there and graze it until that Johnson grass is completely brown. There's no green left. And when you get to that point, then it's going to be safe for you to be able to try to graze that. And then the last thing that I want to mention is I have gotten a couple of questions actually, just this week, about people wanting to kind of steal that last cutting from Bermuda grass. There's some people that's got some Bermuda grass. They had some regrowth on it. They know the cold winter's coming, so the Johnson grass is fixing to, shut down. And can they steal that last cut off of there? And so what I want to say is be careful with that. Okay, because one of the things that could be our biggest issue with that is that if you cut that that Bermuda grass off, and then it has a week to 2 weeks of weather where it tries to regrow a little bit, what it's going to do is it's going to regrow using its root energy. And then if we get a frost and shuts it down, it goes into the wintertime with a low energy reserves. And that's where we set ourselves up for winter kill. Okay. And that's where we could lose, anything between, 10 and 100% of the stand to winter kill, depending on what the variety is. So I'd be really careful about trying to steal that last cut of Bermuda grass hay. If you do decide to do that, you better make sure that you overseed it with some wheat or some ryegrass so that you can have some cover on that to kind of help insulate that stuff during the wintertime. Okay. And so with that, that's everything that I wanted to cover. So I thought now what we would do is just open it up. Does anybody have any questions on this, or actually any other item at this point? So let me see if I can stop sharing my screen. Okay, so do we have any other questions? Well, I'm not seeing any, so that I either answered all the questions or I put them all to sleep. One of the two. Valerie, I'm not sure which one that is.
There we go.
Okay, thank you. That may have been my wife that entered a question here. If you're trying to recover pasture from 50 years of neglect, how would you start? Okay, now that's a really good question. Okay, if I've got a neglected pasture, yeah, my first step is going to be I'm going to take a soil test to see where I'm at from a fertility standpoint, because I need to know, do I need lime? Do I need potash, phosphate? What I'm going to do. The second thing I'm going to do is this fall, I'm going to try to do some evaluation to see how good of a stand of fescue do I have. Do I need to bulk that stand up? Do I need to do some drilling to thicken that stand up? The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to try to evaluate weed pressure. And do I need to try to use some herbicides to kill weeds? If it's something that's been really neglected, you probably got a seed bank to give you enough weeds for the next 20 years. So you may have to have take the next couple of years and concentrate on both cool season and warm season weed control. But once you get fertility in good shape, then you get a good stand of grass and you get on a good weed control program. Usually we can salvage something pretty well with that, because that's really what we need. We need that good stand of grass so that those plants can be competitive. Once you get that, that makes your weed control much easier. That would be how I'd go about it. So I know you look at a field and it may look pretty daunting because you got every sort of weed out there and briars and just everything. Mow it, evaluate your stand of grass, get your soil fertility in good shape, and start targeting your weeds, and you can get a long way right there. It's mostly timber now with very little grass left. So what I'm assuming that means is when you say, well, if you're saying timber, like it's big trees, okay, that's a whole nother issue that you got to deal with. But if we're talking about, it's kind of in that successional type of pattern where you're starting to get, saplings coming back up and some real woody type of plants. If there's a way that you could bush hog that to get that down, and then there's some herbicides that we have to be able to use that do a good job on woody plants. So there's one called Pasture Guard that is a really good woody plant control. And you may have to try to do that. But I say the first thing to do is to see if you can kind of mow that thing down and start getting some light down to those grass plants and see what you have. I'll tell you just personal experience. Okay, the property that we live on now, when we bought it 20 years ago, so I guess when we got there, it just was saplings and briars, as tall as a tractor. And I went through and mowed it down to get all those, saplings and briars and everything down. And I actually never had to do any herbicide control. That mowing, just kind of consistently mowing that, got it now to where I've got other broadleaf weeds, but they're not those woody things. They just got other things that I just am not quite as worried about. But I think it is possible to be able to do that. Can you speak to the problem of foxtail? Okay. Depends on which foxtail we're talking about. Okay. Our foxtails tend to be those summertime weeds. Okay. So a lot of times we'll have yellow foxtail or something like that. It's just a winter annual. A summer annual that's coming in during the summertime. And so, we don't have great ways to be able to control those kind of herbicide wise in tall fescue. And so the best thing that you can do is to get a good stand of grass, and then just recognize that when you get to that mid to late part of the summertime, some of those grasses are going to come in because the fescue is not competitive enough. Now, if the one that we're talking about is the knot root foxtail, it's a similar situation. I have seen that more in West Tennessee than I have over on the eastern side of the state, but it's a perennial, and that one is it's kind of a pain, and it's hard to try to deal with, and we don't have good ways to really control that without completely renovating a pasture. So when is the best time to, questions are moving on me. When is the best time to spray blackberries in a pasture? Okay, the best time to control blackberries is going to be kind of in that springtime when they have blooms on them. Is really the best time to be able to control them. So you can either broadcast or spot spray with that Pasture Guard, and you want to do it about when they have kind of the blooms on them. The key thing to being able to control blackberries is to keep in mind that as much as you're seeing on the top growth, you may have 10 times more of that in the root system down below. I mean, maybe 10 times is a little exaggeration, but you got a lot of it down there. So you got to get enough of that herbicide in there to be able to kill that root material. And so the thing you don't want to do, okay, is you don't want to mow it and let that stuff regrow, you know, just a foot or two tall and then spray it. You want to let it get a lot of that top growth. Don't mow it prior to the spraying. Then you want to spray it, and then don't mow it for 6 weeks. So even if that top growth, you know, dies and turns crispy brown, don't mow it for 6 weeks, and you still want to let some of that herbicide be translocated into those roots. And that program will give you pretty good control on blackberries. I'm not going to say it's going to give you 100% control, but it should give you 70 to 80% control pretty easily if you follow that pattern. Would poisoning from prussic acid be a possibility for a couple of recently dead cattle, or would it be too early in the season for that to happen? I shouldn't have asked the questions, Mallory. That's a hard one. I'm not going to say that it's impossible. It's possible, you know, because we have had some cool temperatures, and really that prussic acid is happening when it shocks, you know, the plant and it causes to release that prussic acid. That wouldn't be my first choice. I would tend to think, knowing what we've had over the last, you know, month, I would tend to think it might be nitrates over prussic acid. And so a vet would have to help you try to be able to identify that, but it is a possibility. I'm not going to say it's not possible, but it is possible. Let's see, for fall seeding, what should I use if I want to buy in winter calves on that grass? Is there one seed that increases weight gain more than others? Okay, that's a good question. So if you got something you want to drill this fall and you want to stock your calves on to get them to grow, the best thing to be able to use. So your options are going to be things like wheat, annual ryegrass, or triticale or rye, those winter ones. Probably the one of the best ones that you could use is wheat. Wheat does really well. And here's the thing, if you look at the research that's been done, there's really not that big of a difference in the weight gain on calves between the different species. The thing that's going to influence the weight gain of those calves is going to be how much forage they have available to them. So the more forage you have available to them, the more they can be selective and just eat the tops of the leaves off. And that's where they're going to get their highest quality diet. That's where they're going to gain the most weight. So it's really, there's not a big difference between species. It has more to do with making sure that you don't graze that forage all the way into the ground and make them eat, you know, those stems and stuff. You want them just eating leaves. So it was I think it's the yellow foxtail. So if you see yellow foxtail, you know, number one, you have to, you know, you could do some timely mowing to try to reduce seed production on those things. Of course, it's too late to do that now, but for next year, make sure you got a good stand of grass to limit how much area there is for foxtail to be able to come in. And then I also think it's just a matter of recognizing that when you get into that August period, and it's been hot and it's been dry and the fescue is slumped, and that's perfect weather for that yellow foxtail to grow, you're just not going to be able to particularly keep it out. So it might be kind of slightly adjusting your expectations a little bit. Any way to control cheat grass in hayfields? Cattle graze it out of pastures, but it's a problem in hayfields. No, not really any way to control it. It's a winter annual grass. We don't have much in terms of being able to control that in a perennial pasture. So the best thing you can do, I mean, I know I sound like a broken record, but you got to have as strong of a stand of a grass of the fescue as you can, so you don't have any open areas to get a lot of the cheat in. So if you're seeing a lot of cheat in the pasture, my first thought would be maybe your stand of fescue is not as thick as it should be. You might need to do some reseeding. And the other thing too is, you know, maybe you're ending up with a little bit of, you know, check your soil fertility because maybe your fescue is not being quite as aggressive as it could be. Let's see, is there anything that can be done to help grass in extremely dry weather? Pay your preacher more would be one, so you get some rainfall, okay? And then that doesn't always help. So no, there's not a lot that you can do. You're not going to do much, okay, in terms of making fescue grow more during the summertime. I mean, fescue is adapted to temperatures when it's in the 60s and 70s. We start getting into those 80s and 90s, fescue is going to, and all our cool season grasses are just really going to struggle. And so the grasses that do the best during that period are going to be the warm season grasses, Bermuda grass, sorghum Sudan grass, crabgrass, Johnson grass, all these warm season grasses. So from a farm production standpoint, what you might need to do is think, okay, I need to have some of my acres where I know I'm going to get my spring and my fall grazing. And that's where my fescue is going to really fit in there. But I need to have a plan to deal with the summertime. I need help during mid to late June, July, and August. So you might need to plant some warm season grass, maybe put some crabgrass or some sort of Sudan grass, something like that, and graze that, have that specifically for the grazing time. And that's really about, what you can do. You can try to irrigate fescue as much as you want. The problem is the temperatures, are so high that the tall fescue is losing water through transpiration almost as fast as it can take it up from the soil. So regardless of how much you irrigate, I mean, you'll make it grow a little bit more, but it's never going to grow as well during the summertime, regardless of how much you irrigate, as it does in the springtime. So instead of fighting against Mother Nature, what we need to do is take advantage of these warm season grasses, plant those and utilize those. Okay, what about getting rid of sage grass? Okay, I get those questions a lot. So sage grass is it's a perennial warm season grass, and we see it right now because you're getting all those seed heads up there, and they're going to start turning kind of that orangish kind of color and all. And so the way that really the only way that you can get rid of sage grass is to outcompete it with the fescue. Again, I'm going back to the same thing I've said over and over again. So if you want to get rid of sage grass, here's the recommendation. Number one, take a soil test. See what you need to do for fertility. You could have a low pH, you could have low phosphate, could have low potash levels, or you could have any combination of those. So get soil fertility corrected. Number two, evaluate your stand of grass. If you have a good stand of grass, the broom sage does not have enough as much opportunity to get in there. So fertilize, get a good stand, fertilize well in the spring. And then the other thing that you want to do is clip those fields twice during the summertime. Once kind of in that kind of mid to late July period when that broom sage first puts that seed head up, and then you want to do it again kind of in that kind of first to mid September period, something like that. Because what you're trying to do is you get into that fall, that late summer period, that broom sage is trying to produce seed to reproduce itself. So if you clip it during that summertime, okay, it's going to force it to regrow ahead. Then you come in and clip it in that early kind of the mid-September period, it's going to try to regrow again and produce a seed head. But then it's going to be cooling off at that same time. And that plant's going to go into that wintertime with a weakened kind of carbohydrate or energy reserve, and you'll begin to kill some of those plants. And it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, you're not going to do that, and all of a sudden you're going to have 80 to 90% of the broom sage disappear. But what you'll see, if you keep that consistent pattern up, good stand, fertility, and that two mowings, you'll start to see that amount of that broom sage disappear every year to where eventually you'll get rid of the majority of it. Okay, my land was all trees last year. I knocked them all down. I planted winter wheat and Bermuda, had good results with minimal weeds, was told to plant clover and rye for November 1st. Do I need to add fescue? I am in West Tennessee. I don't know if it's absolutely necessary that you plant fescue. A really good forage program is the Bermuda grass during the summertime overseeded with some sort of winter annual, whether it be wheat or ryegrass or whatever. That can work perfectly. And it's easy because particularly like if you're using ryegrass, it's pretty easy to seed. You get a lot of yield off of it. And you can make that rotation work, but it does require seeding every year with that ryegrass. If you decide you want to drill fescue in there, you can do that. But the only way I recommend that you do that is if you have a really good rotational grazing program. And the reason is because if you get a fescue Bermuda grass mix, when you get into that May and June period over there in West Tennessee, when both of those plants are growing, the cattle are going to want to select the fescue over the Bermuda grass because it's more palatable to them. And they're going to want to tend to graze that fescue out. So you want to make sure you have a good rotational grazing program where you put the animals in, they graze everything, then you get them out and you let everything regrow. But if you don't rotationally graze and the animal continues to graze everything, what's going to happen over the course of 2 or 3 years is they're going to graze every bit of that fescue out. You're just going to be left with a Bermuda grass stand. So that's partially going to depend on what you want to do in terms of the grazing management and that kind of stuff. Okay, how do you control dog fennel? Okay, so dog fennel is kind of a warm season perennial weed. If I was really good on the computer, what I'd be able to do right now is to go on the computer and show y'all a picture of it. But it's got these real fine, feathery type of leaves, and that I think can get probably 3 to 4 foot tall. And one of the ways that you can control that, there's a herbicide called chaparral that is got aminopyrrolid in it, and it has metsulfuron, and that can do a pretty good job of controlling that. But the thing is you got to get it when it's that tall, not when it's that tall. So if you wait and it gets 3 foot tall, you probably better mow it and then try to get it to regrow. You want to get it when it's small, and you can do a pretty good job on it like that. Any guidance for green briars and moss? Okay, so moss, if I start seeing moss, okay, what that tells me is probably it's a wet, shaded area and potentially a low pH. And so you could try to put lime on it, raise the pH, but if it is shaded area, you have a hard time getting grass to grow because it doesn't have enough light. So that would be the thing I'd worry about with that. From a green briar standpoint, on the briars, that pasture guard is probably the way that you're going to want to try to go with those and try to use that. That's probably one of our best recommendations in terms of trying to control the different briars and woody plants. And just for y'all's information, one of the things we have on utbeef.com is we have our weed control manual. So if you go under forages and look under, I don't know exactly the exact title, but it's like weeds, something, I don't know, but you look under that section and you can see our weed control manual for Tennessee. And on page 61 is where the forage section starts. I know that because I go to that thing constantly to refer to that stuff. So go to page 61, that's where forages start, and you can see all our herbicide recommendations. And one of the things that's interesting is there's a couple of charts in there that list a whole bunch of different weeds and all the different herbicides and which ones, what kind of control you'll get with all the different ones. Okay, so successfully controlling woody plants and fence lines. Going back to that pasture guard again. That's really one of the better ways to be able to do it, to control those woody plants. Anything that I have, whether it's in a fence line or whether it's in spots across the field, one of the first ones we recommend would be pasture guard. A lot of people used to use, I've just drawn a blank, Mallory, on the name of that herbicide that used to be used. Can't remember what it was. But it was a mixture of 2,4-D and triclopyr. And man, I bet there's people on this call right now that are trying to help me remember the name of that thing because they know it. But anyway, I can't remember what the name of it is. It shows you I'm getting old. But anyway, the pasture guard is the new better version of that because it doesn't have any 2,4-D in it. So it's better to be able to use. So that would be the woody plant herbicide that we would recommend for people to use. With fertilizer prices being crazy, what are some good cost-effective alternatives? Number one alternative is going to be clovers, okay, because clovers are going to put nitrogen into the soil. And so that would be what we recommend. Come in February, last 2 weeks of February, put 2 pounds of white, 4 pounds of red. That's how you're going to be able to cut out your spring nitrogen. Past that, we don't have, huge amounts of oxygen because plants need nutrients. We can't avoid that. And so if you're producing hay off of the field, you're taking all those nutrients off with that hay. Now, if you're grazing, okay, 90% plus of the nutrients are just getting deposited right back on the field through the feces and the urine. And so if you want to cut your nutrient requirements down or your fertilizer needs down, one of the things you can do is you can rotationally graze. Because what you can do is you as you rotate the animals, they're going to do a better job spreading the manure and the urine around, because instead of dropping all the manure under the trees or around the water trough, they're going to graze, kind of all over the crossbow. There you go. All right, anonymous attendee. Crossbow is what it was. Yay for us. But anyway, so getting back to the fertilizer thing, and you can rotationally graze can help you. Other alternatives would be, if you have any access to, poultry litter, something like that, those are really good nutrient sources. They provide, a lot of phosphate and potash and some nitrogen. So that would be another way to be able to go. But, past that, we don't have a huge amount of options, but by far the best one is clovers. How about controlling in pastures? Okay, so I can't say that I can tell you right off the top of my head what the herbicide is to be able to use for mullein, but so we might need to go to that manual, be able to look. But I can't tell you right now off the top of my head how well even 2,4-D does on that. So whoever is answering that or asking that question, what I say is, look, contact your extension agent with that question. Okay. Chances are they're going to send me an email that says, hey, what about this? And I don't know. And I am going to have to contact Dr. Rhodes, our former Forage weed control specialist. He's retired now, but he'll still hopefully answer my text. He has up to this point. And I'll ask that question and try to find out the answer for that. And maybe we can get that back to you. Okay. I think that's all our questions. Am I correct there? As far as you know, Mallory?
I think so. I don't have any in my chat or Q&A box either. There's some really great questions tonight. I'm excited.
Okay. Well, look, thank y'all very much. Okay. For taking the time out to be able to go to this. Anything that we can ever do to try to be able to help y'all, we're glad to be able to do that. Just for anybody's information, I kind of have moved positions a little bit. I'm the department head for plant sciences. I'm still trying to do the forage stuff as best as I can and answer my questions and all that kind of stuff. But we are in the process of trying to search for a new forage specialist. So, hopefully what's going to happen is after the first of the year, we'll have a new, forage specialist on, and we'll be raring to go with that. All right. So thank you very much, Mallory. Thank you very much for helping me with this.
Thank you. We certainly appreciate you kicking off our fall series tonight. Just as a quick reminder, don't forget our small surveys when you log off tonight. If you'll be able to answer those for us and better help us prepare for next year's webinars, we certainly appreciate it. But I won't take any more time from anybody. See you Thursday. Good night.